Yes.
What was your mindset when you were writing on killing off Lewis in particular, rather than the other four little Indians?
Well, here's the thing. In America, the most dangerous place to be is in the body of a black male, okay, at times. And so, and the thing about being a black male in this country is that there's so many young men or teenagers who are perceived as men, right, because of I'll say like the particular like social profile that's attached to us. And so I've been thinking about this sort of a long time, like the pressures of masculinity and sort of these kinds of dangers, right? Like sort of the way the police respond to you, et cetera, et cetera. And so, it's almost that you could say that, Lewis, by virtue of putting on that costume and putting on that blackface, he also exposes himself to the same risks. And in this case, it was not the best decision, and I've had, I realized when I was looking back that in both this novel and my first novel, there is a dead black male somewhere in the story, but I think that there's an epidemic of violence against black people in this country, and I felt like that as a long time, for a long time. And so that's also just one of the things that I'm working with in my writing, because I guess one of the things I'm trying to do is bring like new ways of looking at that and trying to sort of humanize these characters more than I think we've often been humanized in the popular press. What's happened now is that it's topical because the news is covering all of the violence that we've seen in the contact between a black community and police officers. But when I was working on this, and when I was working on my first novel, this was not a national conversation. So these are ideas that I felt as a writer I had to deal with. My next book might not deal with it as much because the conversation is already being had. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
In the book, Darren didn't attend the reenactment even though it happened in his hometown.
Yeah.
What was your reasoning for not making him go, other than the fact that his father didn't want him to go?
Well, so yeah, this is like another kind of like formal question. So what kind of happens here is that if Darren goes, because he's the consciousness that we're closest to, if Darren attends the reenactment, then what I'd have to do is write the interrogation differently, because we would have an eyewitness that we were actually in the mind of. And so part of what happens with this death around Lewis is the same thing that we see in the news all the time, where there are these competing accounts, right? One person is saying, the person pulled a gun on me and I had to shoot him, and then footage comes out that shows that this person had no gun at all. And so I wanted to kind of take that problem and work on that as well, these competing notions of reality and these conflicting accounts of reality. But if my character, who's the character that's the consciousness character, attends the event, then that means that as a writer, I don't feel that I can get away with obscuring that event, right? Because I've had someone there, I have a witness there. So So part of it was for like the plot, and part of it was for that kind of question of people, like 2 or 3 people being at the same event and being in utter conflict about what actually happened. Yeah. Yes, sir.
How much research did you do in this book?
I did a bit. Not as much for the first one, fortunately, but like a lot about the history, some history of the South, history of Georgia, things like that. I am, I'm a little bit cautious about research because I know a lot of writers who will do research for maybe a year or two before they start writing, and then they'll write for maybe a week or so, and then they'll do 6 months of research, and then they'll write for another week, and they'll do 6 months of research. And what's happening is that when you're doing research, you can tell yourself that you're writing, even though you're not actually getting work done. And you can do the research and feel like you're making headway, but you're not actually getting the book down. So I would try to write as much as I could and then research what I needed to fill in the gaps. So it ends up being a lot of research, but I sort of sprinkle it through the process to avoid just kind of getting lost. And some of it just has to do with like ego and anxiety. Like a lot of writers prefer the research phase just because there's no risk. Like during the research, you can't get anything wrong. You don't have to worry about your sentences. You don't have to worry if the story's right. You don't have to worry whether or not it's going to confuse people. You know, all you have to do is like jot down facts. So a lot of research, but I just say that because if anyone wants to be a writer, wants to be an artist, I just think it's important that you don't let the research disrupt the process of being creative. You know, and so that's a pitfall to avoid. Yeah.